Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this important webinar presented by the Department of Revenue in conjunction with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, the Wisconsin Towns Association, and the Wisconsin Counties Association. This is really important information for all three of these entities and our members, and so we're delighted to be able to present this to you. We will have this recorded. It will be available to look at in the future, and we will go ahead and get the slides out to you as well. My name is Elizabeth Yankee, and I'll be hosting this session with you. And if you do have questions, feel free to use the Q&A box. We'll get to those later on in the programming. I want to introduce our presenters today. So first off is Valia Foy with the Department of Revenue. She is the Division Administrator, State and Local Finance. And then also Sarah Rennenauer, and she's the Director of Local Government Services Bureau. So we're delighted to have both of them with us here today. We're going to hear the information directly from the source and get all of our questions answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate you all inviting the Department of Revenue to present this information for you today. I see a few questions already coming in through the Q&A box. And I think as I go through the initial portion of the presentation, some of those questions may be answered, but we'll certainly circle back towards those with the majority of the time today. So as Elizabeth said, I'm trying to toggle here. Give me just a moment. As Elizabeth said, my name is Sarah Rennenauer. I am the Director of the Local Government Services Bureau. Today, we're going to go through the Maintenance of Effort report and DOR resources that we have created for you all for this new report. And then, like I said, we'll spend the majority of the time, upwards of 40 to 45 minutes, going through questions that you all may have. So first up, you all are likely very familiar at this point, but 660608-2M, a part of 2023 Wisconsin Act 12, created a new maintenance of effort reporting requirement. This report is due to the Department of Revenue July 1st, 2024, and every July 1st thereafter. To touch on the first question I saw come through the Q&A box, all municipalities and all counties must file the SL 305 Maintenance of Effort Report through MyDOR.gov, again, by July 1st, 2024. If there are issues that you're having in MyDOR.gov, certainly happy to address those technology questions for you as well. But I'll reiterate, every municipality and every county must file the SL 305 maintenance of effort. No one is exempt from filing. So if that's the only takeaway from today, we will talk a little bit about the requirements. Every municipality and county has to certify to the Department of Revenue that they are maintaining a level of law enforcement and fire and emergency medical services that is at least equivalent to the previous year. For the July 2024 filing, due July 1, you're actually certifying if the municipality or county is on pace in 2024 to provide services at a level at least equivalent to that which was actually provided throughout the full 12 months of 2023. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on pace concept in the next slide. You all are likely aware, but there is a large shared revenue penalty if the maintenance of effort report is not filed timely or if you fail to certify the required items. The reduction is 15% of your county and municipal aid and your supplemental county municipal aid in the following year. So that would impact your July 2025 shared revenue. Filing the maintenance of effort report, in my mind, can kind of be broken down into two parts. So the first part is the completion of the applicable certification forms by the person in charge of providing the service or responsible for providing the service, in other words. And then the second component is the municipal clerk or the county clerk completing the SL 305 Maintenance of Effort report in MyDOR.gov. So we'll start with that first component, the certifications. First, you need to work to identify if you need to certify for law enforcement services. So this requirement is only for towns, villages, and cities over 20,000 population. So if this is you, you will provide the SL 306 law enforcement certification form to the person responsible for providing the service, such as the police chief. The police chief will review the certification form and complete the form. First, they'll work through the exceptions to identify if any of the exceptions apply. And then if not, they will work through the 3 criteria that they can certify for law enforcement. To successfully certify, they would identify a minimum of 1 of the 3 items that they can certify. Second, you'll work to identify if your municipality or county should certify fire and EMS separately or together. So you have the ability to report fire separate from EMS or combined. If you have one department that provides both fire and EMS, you can provide the person responsible, such as the fire chief, with the combined SL 307 certification form to complete. If you have fire services provided separately from EMS services, then you'll want to certify fire and EMS separately. So you would provide each person responsible for providing fire service with the SL 308 and each person responsible for providing EMS service with the SL 309. That person or those people will review those certification forms, again, identifying if any of the exceptions listed in Section 3 of the form apply, and if not, they will work to identify which of the 4 criteria they can certify. So for fire and EMS, whether reported separately or combined, to successfully certify, they would identify a minimum of 2 items that they can certify. So a couple of things to keep in mind. You may have multiple entities providing your municipality or your county with fire services, and multiple entities providing your municipality or county with EMS services. So you would work to collect a certification form from all parties. This would be the case even if you don't currently contract or pay the entity who is providing you with the fire or the EMS service, for example. The service is still being provided to your taxpayers and residents, and a certification is required. Another example, if you're a part of more than one joint fire department, you would provide, let's say 2 joint fire departments in this example, you would provide 2 SL 308s, fire service certifications, 1 to each fire chief. And then collect them both back. You would likely collect the data that they use to calculate the various criteria as well. Or you may have a municipal EMS service, and you also have a private entity who provides EMS services. So in that example, you would provide 2 SL 309s, the EMS certification, 1 to each EMS director, and then collect them both back with the data that they use to calculate the criteria. Because remember, the maintenance of effort is a report of the municipality or the county as a whole. So if you provide more than one fire chief with a fire certification form, for example, because you're a part of 2 joint fire departments, there needs to be that combination between those 2 certification forms and those 2 sets of fire services data, so that the municipal clerk or the county clerk can combine that information before they go into the MyDOR.gov report to file. DOR has worked to compile a really robust common questions document, and I'll share that a little bit later on the screen. You likely all have seen it at this point, but we walk through those exceptions I referred to which, if applicable, exempt the entity, from having to select the certification criteria for 1 year only. They still must file the maintenance of effort report. It's just that they may qualify for one of the exception options to select. We also include more complex examples and scenarios, as well as some sample calculations that can be used for each certification item. So please be sure you review the common questions document and definitely share it with the person or the people that will be charged with completing the certification forms. I think a lot of the questions that they might have would be answered there for you. The person in charge of providing the service will identify a reasonable method for calculating each certification item as they complete the certification form. So, of course, they should retain documentation, likely share that documentation with the municipality or the county to support their calculations and the criteria that they selected. All certification forms, we have a target due date to have those complete and back to the municipality or county by June 15th. That will allow the municipal clerk or the county clerk time to log into MyDOR.gov and file the SL 305 report. So again, the municipal or county clerk is the one who actually will file the SL 305 with MyDOR.gov, the second kind of component of this. We have filing instructions located on our website, but just kind of high level to share with you all. Section A of the MyDOR.gov report is for the law enforcement certification. If you are a county or a municipality under the 20,000 population, that section will just be grayed out for you. You don't meet the population requirement to complete the law enforcement certification. So you'll simply see that it's grayed out. You'll see a message that you do not need to complete this section, and you can choose next to move on to section B. All municipalities and all counties must complete section B, section C with the attachments, which are those cert forms, and section D, which is the preparer information and signature statement. Couple filing tips, and I touched on it a little bit. First up, make sure to distribute those certification forms to the person or persons responsible for providing the various services, and share with them the link to our common questions on our website as well. If you are a part of multiple entities that provide fire, for example, or provide EMS, for example, there will need to be that sort of component where you're coordinating which items you can certify. So collecting back those certifications from both parties, working to identify what criteria they both have selected, and or collecting the data from them so that you can compile and combine as municipal clerks and county clerks when you're filing the MyDOR.gov report with DOR. Retain that calculation information for your future reference in subsequent years. It will be helpful for you all, but it does not need to be attached or submitted to DOR. In terms of the attachments, you're only attaching the certification forms that were given back to the Muni and the county clerk. And another thing, just keep in mind that this is an annual report. So heading into budget season, consider the maintenance of effort certification items so that as you're compiling your budget and participating in those meetings, that you're keeping this top of mind, because as I mentioned in the first slide, there is a hefty penalty if you're not able to successfully certify. With that, I just wanted to share a couple of resources I mentioned. We have a designated maintenance of effort webpage, provided the link for you there, as well as the common questions and MyDOR.gov form instructions, and then just a link there to the Wisconsin Act 12 summary. A couple additional resources, of course, our website address, various videos surrounding logging in and utilizing MyDOR.gov, and some additional information on our division there for you. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. For Muni officials, there's a link there. Subscribe to DOR email updates. And for county officials, you can email otaz@wisconsin.gov. And at this point, I'd be happy to turn it over for any questions in the Q&A, or if they're able to speak as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. Great information. We have plenty in the Q&A, and I will invite the other association representatives to be promoted into panelists. At this time, they may have some information to share on any of the questions that we have. But let's just start with those that came in early. And I know you answered one of the questions already, and this is a form that needs to be completed by everyone. Every county, every town, every city, every village. So thank you for getting that one right off the bat. And I realize that a lot of these questions are answered in the common questions webpage. So we probably will hear some of those before we get on. But really, a lot of questions on our air. The first one there by Andrew is our area. We contract with a local fire department for service. How do we get the information to use for the report if it's a contracted service?
Yeah, excellent question. So first thing is you're identifying if they're providing fire and EMS or just fire. And it sounds like maybe just fire. So let's roll with that in this example. So you would retrieve the fire certification form and disseminate that to your contact with that private entity. So I would anticipate throughout the year you may have some relationship or some contact with the entity that's providing that service. So share with them the certification form that they're required to complete by law, and share with them the common questions as well. And it does have the statutory language right there in 660608-2M as well, that the person responsible for providing the service is completing that certification or making that certification to DOR. And by completing that certification form, that's the mechanism we're using to collect that certification from that person. So good question. Hopefully that answers that question for you.
Definitely. Thank you. I want to just highlight really quick, we've invited to the conversation in case there's any information that they want to give Joe Ruth from Wisconsin Towns Association, and then Marcy Rainbolt from the Wisconsin Counties Association, as well as Tony Herkert from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. So if there's questions that they can answer, we're certainly here to answer any of the questions. There's quite a few questions in here. I'll just kind of lump them all together. What if
Yeah.
you have a vacant position? So maybe your EMS chief is vacant, or your fire chief is vacant. How do you get that paperwork filled out in that case?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I anticipate that would be impacting various municipalities and counties. So someone likely is in charge. Perhaps it's a deputy chief. Perhaps it's a lieutenant that's been designated to step into that interim chief role in the absence, perhaps a retirement or something like that. So you would just work to identify the person responsible, the person next in line who's been placed in that seat, who's been placed to be in charge of providing that service at that point. So the law doesn't provide that it must be the chief title, let's say. So it is a little bit open-ended there. I anticipate they've designated someone in their absence to fill that leadership or that lead role. Good question.
Okay. And then there's a few other questions in here that are similar as well. Is some areas are serviced by multiple providers, whether it be multiple fire service providers or EMS providers. How do they get that information, collate it, report it?
Yeah, excellent question. And I think there's a couple reasonable methods for doing that. Couple things kind of come to mind. Let's just take an example where you have a municipal EMS, let's say, and then you also contract with a private EMS, perhaps for ambulance or something like that. So the first thing you're doing, you're identifying, okay, I'm going to report EMS separate from fire. My fire is handled in-house at the municipality. EMS, I've got an in-house function, and I also have a private entity, whether I'm contracted with them or not. They provide a portion of the EMS service. So you're grabbing those EMS certification forms. So the SL309 in this example is a separate EMS certification, and you're disseminating that to each group. So the municipal EMS director, perhaps, and then the lead or the director of the private EMS entity. And there's a couple different ways they can approach it. If there's a relationship there, they could certainly work together on the certification and identify for EMS of the 4 certification items, what 2 they can calculate and certify. Because again, remember, you're reporting at the municipal level or at the county level as a whole. You're not reporting half results from the municipal EMS director and the other half results from the private entity. So there could be some cooperation there if it's a known relationship. The other thing you can think about helping to facilitate at a municipal or a county level is collecting the data that they used to complete their calculations, and then manually combining that data at the muni or county level as you're going into My DOR Gov and filing the SL305. So let's say the municipal EMS selected, out of the 4 criteria, perhaps they selected 1 and 3. They've provided the calculation information for you for all 4 pieces of criteria. And then let's say the private EMS entity selected item 1, which is a match, let's say, but then they also selected item 2. They provided you with all 4 calculations for all 4 items. So at the municipal level, when you get these 2 certifications back, you see the first criteria matches between the 2 parties, right? So you should be able to review their data and feel comfortable selecting that item. But then you're going to need to work through items 2, 3, and 4 using the data that they provided and combine that information. For example, they provided the full-time equivalent calculation to you. You would work to combine both sets of data to see if, when combining the data for the current year on pace at this point, let's say through May 1st, 2024, is equal to or greater than the 2023 full-time equivalent data that they provided, for example. So there will be some manual work to combine the data and identify at the municipal level or at the county level what 2 out of the 4 items as a minimum to successfully certify you can select for the municipality as a whole.
Great. Let's give Sarah a break for a second. And there's some questions in here I want to ask of our associations. So this is for either one, but there's a question in here a little bit, and we had it in other sessions as well, is kind of what is the impetus for doing this reporting? Why are we being asked to do more of this? And I'd love to get a viewpoint of either Tony or Marcy or Joe on kind of the why this has come along and why we need this, if they're willing.
I'm happy to step in and certainly welcome Tony and Marcy,
Yeah.
their comments as well. But I will say, as we were working as stakeholders representing all the local government groups throughout the negotiations, this was all part of an incredibly broad shared revenue bill in Act 12. So if you've read through any of that statutory language, you'll note that it is massive. It's pages long. There are any number of somewhat related or somewhat unrelated policy provisions. So I guess I would say it seemed to be the idea of the lawmakers to, as a part of distributing additional money through shared revenue, have several other policy changes, one of which certainly being this one, ensuring, I think, in the state leaders, the legislators' mind that the money is being spent and it's being spent in ways that the state kind of is hoping it will go towards. But I will caveat that by saying the money isn't tied to these maintenance of effort requirements. So the shared revenue money, aside from there being certainly a penalty in shared revenue, there are additional eligible spending categories, and that's up to the local government to decide how to spend it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I would just jump into to say welcome to all of our members and the towns and the counties as well. And thank you to our partners, DOR, the towns and the counties for jointly hosting this webinar. Just to add on to what Joe said a little bit, I think when we were working with legislators who are interested in providing additional shared revenue and tying that shared revenue to the state sales tax, there was an overall, I think, desire to tie that funding to critical local services, the basket of services that every single municipality should be providing in the legislature's mindset. That is how we got to your new shared revenue can be spent on those critical areas, which include public safety, transportation, and public works. So all of the things that I think, at least from a municipality standpoint, cities and villages, that's probably 70 to 90% of most municipalities' budgets are in that bucket of core service. And then I think there was another segment or section of legislators that really wanted to put an emphasis on public safety in their communities. And therefore, like Joe said, there is no direct tie to your shared revenue supplement or that percentage increase with the state sales tax directly going to public safety. But there is the maintenance of effort that the legislators put in to kind of gauge where the spending is going to happen and when that will happen. So it's not unnoticed that the legislature provided the opportunity to do the first report before any of the supplement is sent out to local units of government. So you can report where you are now today. And then that is what is kind of categorized or tracked year after year. Not back to today, but annually moving forward. So hopefully that helped between Joe and I don't know if Marcy wants to say anything, but hopefully that kind of sets the stage.
No, I don't need to add anything. I concur with both of you, and I think everyone knows that we probably have the least amount of worries when it comes to this. No, I concur.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to go back to Sarah because there's plenty of questions for DOR here. There's some common questions around, Sarah, if you could give us some more guidance on the population thresholds with police reporting specifically. There seems to be some questions on 500 or less, 20,000 or more. What are some rough guidelines with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right within the legislation, 660608-2M, it calls out law enforcement maintenance of effort or services equivalent to the prior year is to be reported by towns, villages, and cities over 20,000 population. So there isn't anything in the language about a 500 number. All counties, when you log into MyDOR.gov, you will see Section A for law enforcement. You'll see a little statement that you do not need to complete this section. It'll be grayed out for you. We've built the system so it will know based on your logon what county you're associated with. So Section A will be unavailable to you. And it will also ping for municipalities off our most recent population data as well. So it will know right away if you're someone who needs to complete Section A for law enforcement. So that's one way to check if you're not sure, is go ahead and log into the maintenance of effort report out in MyDOR.gov and look at that for Section A. If it's available for you to type in, then you're required to complete it. I think it's maybe roughly 25 to 30 municipalities in the state will be completing Section A for law enforcement. But again, go ahead and log in there. That'll be your first way to test to see if you need to complete the law enforcement certification. And then just as a reminder, everyone's logging into MyDOR.gov because everyone must complete Section B for fire and EMS, Section C, which is where you'll attach those certification forms, and Section D as the preparer of the MyDOR.gov report. So
Great.
good question.
Thank you. And then there is a question on, in Wisconsin, we have a lot of volunteer only organizations, specifically fire or EMS, sometimes both. Those are volunteer roles and maybe don't even, get funds from the city, village, or township. Do they need to complete that EMS certification?
Yeah, that's a good question. There isn't anything in the legislation that exempts a municipality or county from certifying because they have a volunteer entity or agency. There is some language specifically related to how to calculate volunteer in terms of a full-time equivalent number of personnel. But that's all that the legislation speaks to. So again, it doesn't exempt anyone from filing because they have the service provided by a solely volunteer agency. So every municipality and every county must still complete the certification report.
Okay. And then a similar situation, but slightly different. There's a couple of people that have put a question in the Q&A box on, they contract with a outside provider for EMS. Does that outside provider need to provide them information? And then also, you know, sometimes that outside provider doesn't even have a financial arrangement with the municipality. It's maybe with the hospital or separately. So, what's your guidance on a service like that, where it's totally different from the municipality?
Yeah, whether you have a contract in place with them or not, or they are providing your municipality with that service without a contract, you are still working to collect that certification from the person in charge of providing that service. So that would be perhaps the director or what have you of that private entity. And then you're gathering that information back from them so that you can complete the MyDOR.gov report. So the guidance is the same, even if you are working with a private entity who provides that service. The one thing I will point out, there are a couple of exceptions in law. And again, you'll see these if you open up the certification forms, you'll see these in section 3 of the certification. So for example, if you consolidated service in the prior year, so in that example, it would be in 2023 because you're completing this filing in July of 2024. So there are a couple exceptions that are outlined for you, again, in section 3 of the certification forms, and they are called out one by one in our common questions as well. So if it's a recent consolidation in the prior year in 2023, an exception may apply. Because again, what you're trying to compare is actual data from 2023 to a point in time in 2024. So of course, if you just contracted with them in the prior year, you may not have that apples to apples comparison. But outside of that, there's nothing in law that exempts a municipality or county from filing if they obtain their services from a private entity or a hospital or something like that.
Okay. And then for counties, there are counties within the state who actually don't provide fire EMS because the municipalities are so prevalent within the county, right? How do they file? Do they collect that information from the municipality, file as zero? What's that process like?
Yeah, that's actually an excellent question. We don't need a county to sort of duplicate the information that every municipality is going to be reporting to DOR. So kind of what I mean by that is if you're a county and you do not have any expenditures for fire or EMS in 2023, $0. And to a point in time in 2024, let's take May 1st, $0. So that comparison for that criteria would be equal to or greater than the prior year. So you'd be able to select that criteria. Another example is the full-time equivalent fire EMS personnel. In 2023, at a county level, you had 0. At a point in time in 2024, let's take May 1st, 2024, you also had 0. So that comparison from 2023 to a point in time in 2024 would be equivalent to the level that you provided in the prior year. So you'd be able to select that criteria. So there's two criteria right there. And again, to successfully certify, you're filing timely by July 1, and you're, for fire and EMS, selecting 2 of the 4 criteria at a minimum. So that would be a successful certification. Keep in mind, I keep mentioning a successful certification for fire and EMS is a minimum of 2. But if you calculate all 4 and you can choose all 4, there's no penalty for doing that. Certainly do that. Retain that calculation information because it will be helpful for you when you go to use a comparison next year, let's say of 2023 to 2024. And updated guidance will be coming on that after this reporting cycle. But hopefully that helps answer that question. Just kind of checking the box, going through each of the 4 criteria, just working through your calculations, and you'll find that 0 is something that you can calculate and use from prior year to current year, for example.
Sure. Now, today you may have a single representative from your community that's on the line today. Maybe it's your clerk, maybe it's someone else. Is there a good place to go with simplified instructions, say for that fire chief that's part-time, that just wants to know what they need to do when? Is there a place on the DOR website for that information?
We do have our maintenance of effort landing page. I linked to it in the resources slide. When you click on that, it's going to take you to those certification forms. They can open up the certification form. They're going to review the legislation basically on that form. They're going to review the exceptions as stated in law, and then they're going to review the 4 criteria as stated in law. But we've expanded on that to help sort of drill into what does that actually mean in our common questions. So that really is the resource for them. There are 14 general questions and 6 related to fire and EMS. So really a total of 20 questions that I definitely do encourage them to peruse before they sit down and try to do it. As always, LGS, Local Government Service Bureau, is happy to help out. So they can always email us at lgs@wisconsin.gov if they have reviewed the material and still have questions. We're working to field those emails on a daily basis. I would just encourage them to reach out sooner rather than later, because with that critical filing deadline, we don't want anyone to reach out and be waiting for an answer that would impact their filing deadline. So we work to respond to everyone within 24 hours, but of course that's contingent on the number of inquiries we get at the 11th hour too. So please keep that in mind, but we're happy to help. Send us an email if they've reviewed and they're still stuck.
Sure. There are, of course, organizations out there that have separate fire and EMS. Is your guidance to file those separately or together? How does that work?
Yeah, we're giving both options.
Okay.
So the municipality can decide if they want to report fire and EMS together, which would require both parties to work together and complete that combined certification form. The SL 307 is the combined fire and EMS. They would work together to compile those 4 calculations and certify for the municipality or for the county as a whole. The other option is to allow fire to certify separately from EMS. And that's likely if they don't have much interaction between the 2 of them, they are truly independent of each other, then we're affording you that ability to. The fire certification to be successful would select 2 of the 4 criteria if they're able to calculate and confirm that level of service is equal to that in 2023. And then EMS would do the same. They could select a different 2 of the 4. And then when the clerk, the municipal clerk or the county clerk, logs into MyDOR.gov, they'll be asked, do you want to report fire and EMS together or separate? And based on their response, they will be able to mirror the certification forms by checking the same boxes that were checked on those certification forms and attaching those in section C.
Okay. Great. Another question is, there seems to be some difficulty getting this kind of information, whether it be from a, let's say, volunteer chief or a outside provider. Um, if your skills of getting information out of people aren't quite what they're supposed to be, how do you proceed if you can't get that information?
You know, that's a really tricky question. So here we are, May 21st. I would say you have time.
Okay.
Please continue to try to make those connections and to work to obtain that information. You can share the legislation. 660608-2M provides that the person responsible for providing the service must complete the certification. So it is in law there. I would encourage you to continue to try. If we get a little closer to the filing deadline and you want to send us an email letting us know that the various efforts that you've made, we may need to review on a case-by-case basis at that time. But I would just say there's plenty of time right now. Please continue to try to make that contact, that relationship. This is an annual report. So it'd be a good idea to establish that groundwork now, knowing that this is something that needs to be completed every year. And again, share that statutory language with them. And also share with them the impact on your municipality or county for not filing. I anticipate a lot of them live in the municipality or county. They have a lot of interest in seeing the municipality and the county do really well. So just make that connection and share that information with them so they understand their role in this and the impact on the muni or county if they're not able to certify.
Sure. Could you one more time talk about that? There is a question in the chat what is the impact, and feel free to rely on our association reps too, but what is the impact if we don't get this done?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key takeaways from today. It's a large shared revenue penalty, right? It's 15% of the county municipal aid payment and the supplemental county municipal aid payment. So when you think in terms of filing right now, let's say you don't file by July 1st or you're unable to certify the required minimum number, I shouldn't say required, the minimum number of criteria. That's going to result in your entire county municipal aid and supplemental county municipal aid piece of your July 2025 payment being withheld. Because remember, you're only getting 15% of your county municipal aid and your supplemental county municipal aid in July. So that's withholding that entire piece from your July 2025 payment. Mm. If you're a recipient of utility aid or the expenditure restraint incentive program, that's all that you would see come July 2025. So that's a massive impact on your budget. We issue shared revenue original estimates September 15th. So you would see how much you are slated to get next July, and you'll be able to know the exact dollar amount of what would be withheld if you fail to certify. And you all likely already have that idea because of the estimates that were provided September of 2023 to general idea.
Great. Kind of a couple of questions are alluding to this, but sometimes if you have a very busy fire EMS person that's providing you information, they may wing it, or we may not be confident in the information a contract service provider is providing us. Is there an audit procedure by DOR for this information? Is there a way for us to cure anything that's incorrect that we're submitting?
That's an excellent question. Within law, there is not an audit component for DOR at this time. However, if I'm a municipal clerk or a county clerk, I'm likely not going to submit the SL 305 until I've reviewed the data that was used to make the calculations and select the certification. So again, that is more on the relationship between the municipal clerk and the county clerk and the people in charge of completing the certification form. It is going to take a cooperative effort, I think, to feel comfortable with the calculations that were completed from year to year. and being able to compare and review that data as well before you go into MyDOR.gov to make that submission. You are attaching the certifications that they signed as well. It's true to the best of your knowledge, but you certainly want to review that data yourselves, I would anticipate.
Great. Another question here is, if fire or EMS are contracted and will not provide the certification, what should the Muni do? I know this kind of goes into the last one, but again, what are our options here?
Yeah, that's okay. I think this, may surface here a little bit, but again, I would just encourage you to continue trying to make a connection with that entity, sharing with them the legislation where they are required to make a certification, share with them the penalty that's at risk for the municipality or the county if you fail to certify on account of them, not working with you to complete this. We have a little time here. I would encourage you not to get discouraged and continue trying. It does take some cooperation. But if we get to that point where, you've tried every day for the last 3 weeks and, they're sending you an email saying, they refuse or something, reach out to us. We will review likely on a case-by-case basis. So send us an email at lgs@wisconsin.gov with the information. But I anticipate we have a little time here. You may find if you can make a connection, you may be successful. And again, this is an annual reporting requirement. So if you're not able to do it this year and we review and we're able to do something, it's still going to surface for you again next year and the year after that and the year after that. So I think it's going to be really critical to establish that relationship with those entities and involve, the various representatives from your municipality or your county and those entities. They may have relationships already.
Great. Let's give Sarah another break here and bring back our association leaders here. Tony Herkert, you've popped up on screen first. So, is there something you want to elevate to the conversation today?
I do. And it gives Sarah a break, but just briefly while I explain the question, because I've been reviewing the questions as Elizabeth is doing an excellent job, but I've also been kind of going through just trying to keep track of some. And one that I wanted to highlight is, Sarah, can you talk a little bit about the calculations or the homework that we've been calling it? Where is that collected, placed, analyzed, and does it need to be turned in? That was kind of a theme running through. So I thought I'd get that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. You bet. Hopefully I just shared my screen again and you're seeing the maintenance of effort common questions. And I know I kind of beat the dead horse, but this is our meat and potatoes of this program. A lot of the answers we've tried to capture here and we'll continue to work to update. But for law enforcement, for example, if you look at the law enforcement section, we have called out each criteria. So for law enforcement, there are 3 certification options, and we've provided sample calculations for each. So for example, how do we determine monies raised by tax levy by the municipality and expended for employment costs of law enforcement officers? We kind of talk through the fact that you're comparing actual data, not budget data, right? And then we provide 2 reasonable calculation methods that you could walk through with that police chief and utilize. It is going to be critical that the calculation documents or documentation is retained. And I would certainly anticipate the police chief retain that, but I would also anticipate the municipality or county clerk wanting to have that information, because this is going to be kind of a rolling report, right? So you're going to always want to have at your, accessible to you, the calculations that were made for 2023 and then for 2024 and then for 2025 and so on, for a couple of reasons. We were taught in school to show your work, right? So you always want to be able to back up your calculations. And that's the primary reason. But the other thing too is you need to think about comparing from year to year. We want that apples to apples comparison. So if you calculate using our calculation method 1, for example, you calculate 2023 and then you calculate through a point in time in 2024. You want to use that same methodology in the following year when you go to calculate. I will mention this is the only year that we anticipate this on-pace review, this point in time review in 2024. We do anticipate our guidance being adjusted for future filing years where we will have 2 full years to compare. But the point is you're going to want your comparison or your calculation to be an apples to apples. So you always want to retrieve that information to complete the same calculation for the following year. It does not, the calculation information is not submitted to DOR at this time. You're submitting the certification forms where the boxes were checked and the signatures were obtained, but we're not collecting that calculation information. Another thing I'll mention about the calculation data, if you're someone who has, you're a part of two joint fire departments, let's say, and again, we kind of talked about each fire chief needing to work through the 4 criteria and the 4 calculations. You might have one joint fire department who doesn't feel that they can certify the number of full-time equivalent employees from prior year to current year is equivalent. And you might have the other joint fire who can when they calculate that. If you take both sets of that data though, and combine it, you might see for the municipality as a whole, we did in fact keep the same number of full-time equivalent staff in 2024 as we did in 2023. So that's an example where that data would be used and combined at the muni or at the county level. So a couple of reasons, long story short, definitely collect that data. It's going to be really helpful for you.
Great. I have a feeling before I'm going to invite Joe to ask a question or paint some color in just a minute here. But before we do that, we're going to be left with a lot of questions. If we can, we'll pull the report for you and send that over to DOR. Are you constantly updating that common questions page? Are you open to kind of helping us build a FAQ for our members? I feel like we're going to get a lot more, and there's so many unanswered questions here today.
Yeah, we work to compile this information as a result of various work group meetings where we tried to incorporate or anticipate a lot of the questions and the scenarios. We have done one revision to where we added 2 questions that we were getting frequently.
Mm-hmm.
So we did add that, and don't ask me which 2 because I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But we are documenting the questions that come in through our LGS at wisconsin.gov or our phone calls. If it's sort of a unique scenario that really only pertains to one county or one municipality at best, we're kind of handling that on a case-by-case basis. If we're getting repetition in the questions, where we are identifying, oh, something is missing from our common questions, or there's a functionality issue. Knock on wood, we don't have that yet. But yes, we will work to update our common questions with those kind of frequent asks that we're getting. So yeah, we're definitely tracking those and happy to continue our partnership with the league and the town and the counties association as we have so far.
Perfect. Speaking of the towns, Joe Ruth, you have something to say here?
Yeah, that actually leads absolutely perfectly into the comment I wanted to make, which was just to stress to all of you on the webinar today, check out that document and that website that DOR has put together. Go there first for your questions. We're going to get to as many as we can here today, but obviously only a few minutes left. Many of the questions that I'm seeing left in the Q&A here are answered on that website. So DOR did a great job putting that together. Please go there first with your questions and then obviously follow up if there are still questions remaining.
Mm-hmm. Great. Marcy, if you want to jump in, feel free to jump in. Like we have 5 minutes left, so we're not going to get to the 100+ questions that are in the Q&A box. But Marcy, is there something you want to highlight today too?
I would just say that for anybody who's on the call who is a member of the Wisconsin Counties Association, like you said, we're not going to get to answer all the questions. If there's something on the website you do not see that answers the question that you are searching for, I would just say, please feel free to reach out here at the association, and we'll be happy to try to be the conduit between, the member and the department. So please feel free to contact me at the association if you're our county member and you have an outstanding question.
Mm-hmm. I'll just continue. We'll try to get through as many as we can the next 4 minutes here, Sarah. But a question that keeps coming up, and I know we've talked about it, but I'm going to ask it again. If you're part of a joint service community, or your fire department services multiple municipalities, what's the guidance on how to file that information?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. First, you're working to identify who's in charge of providing that service. So let's say we have 2 fire chiefs. We'll just keep it simple. In that example, EMS is handled separately.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say we're members of 2 joint fires. So you're disseminating those 2 fire certification forms to the 2 people in charge, likely a fire chief or something like that. You're sharing the common questions information with them as well, and you're asking them to work through the certification criteria, again, showing their work, sharing that work, so that you as a municipality or a county can work to combine that information when you get those 2 certifications back, so that you can certify for the muni or the county as a whole. And the thing that you do want to kind of keep in mind about that, there's reasonable methods that they might use to complete the calculation. So again, in our common questions, we provided a few examples. One that comes to mind is, do they want to report or calculate rather the 4 items for the joint fire as a whole? So for example, when you're thinking about number of full-time equivalent, are they going to calculate that for the joint fire district as a whole? Or are they going to calculate it at a municipal level? Let's say there's 5 municipalities as a part of the joint fire. Are they going to calculate 5 times the number of full-time equivalent personnel assigned to that municipality? I would envision the path of least resistance might be for the joint fire chief to calculate for the joint fire district as a whole. Mm-hmm. And that would be reasonable. If they compile that data at a municipal level, let's say each of the 5 municipalities, they have the data for all 5, the number of full-time equivalent, they have the response times for each of the 5 munis, they can certainly report that way as well. But again, I would envision the joint fire chief may report for the joint district as a whole. And in that scenario, he would complete 5 fire certifications, 1 for each municipality, because Section A has the municipality name. So he's completing it 1 for each municipality, but he may have calculated for the joint fire district as a whole. So on every single one, he checks the same 2 boxes, let's say. But okay, again, it's a reasonable method, right? Like he or she could come up with any method that they deem reasonable. And again, making sure that they're using that same methodology from year to year. So we have an apples to apples comparison and sharing their work with the municipality or the county.
Say more on that year to year, because that was something that was in the Q&A as well. Is that July 2023 to July 2024? What are we using for a year?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this first reporting period, obviously, we're in the middle of 2024, so it's a little bit unique. And we do anticipate sharing some updated guidance after this reporting cycle. But for this report in particular, you are comparing all 12 months of actual data from 2023. So you're not using budget, you're using actual, and you're working through all of the calculations for 2023. Then you can do a couple different things for 2024. You could choose, and I kind of keep going back to a point in time, May 1, let's say, could be April 1, could be April 30th, to complete the same calculation for those 4 or 5 months, let's say for 2024, so that you can compare and say, okay, we are on pace so far in 2024 with actual data to provide a level of service equal to or greater than the actual data from 2023. Another thing you could look at is a percentage. So just to keep it simple for my brain right now, let's take March 31st, 25% of the year. So you could compare 25% of 2024's actual data to where you were in 2023, 25% of the way through the year. So a couple different approaches you can take for that because we are filing in the middle of 2024. Again, we do anticipate adjusting our guidance once we have a full year of 2023 and a full year of 2024 to compare. And we anticipate it to be a full 12-month comparison going forward. This is the only year we're kind of looking at that on pace review. And we've kind of walked through that in our questions too, because I know it can get a little tricky. But the key takeaway is we're looking at actual data, not projections, not budgeted, not hopes and wishes.
Yeah. Well, we are at 101, and I know there's so many more questions, but we did promise this to be just an hour, and in a couple seconds here, if you could, Sarah, what are the like main points that you really wanted just people to walk away with knowing today?
Yeah, number one, filing deadline, July 1st. Do not miss the filing deadline. We absolutely do not want to withhold any shared revenue because of a missed filing deadline. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, in order to be able to certify the items required, it is going to take collaboration and cooperation. So establish those relationships now. This is an annual report. So make it easy on yourself and get in touch with those people and establish those relationships now. Again, lgs@wisconsin.gov is available to assist if you don't find the answer to your question in our common questions. And I know I keep going back to that, but with the volume of questions, we have to provide a resource to start with. As Joe mentioned, please review that first. If we keep getting repeat questions where we're identifying something is truly missing from that document, we will absolutely work to update. But we're here to help. We don't want anyone to miss the filing deadline or be unsuccessful with filing. So reach out.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We are going to capture the list of questions and try to collate those and hopefully add more to your webpage for FAQs. Obviously, each of the associations and the league will be talking about this with their members. This recording will be made available. I'm sure that we're going to just continue to talk on this in every instance, make sure that we take full advantage of that shared revenue payment that's been promised to us. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to the attendees. And we hope this information was valuable for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your representative. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.